Is Lucas Hartfiel. I'm on the support team, and my main part of the team is I'm like the Linux and KVM guy. So this is kind of my specialty. Before we get started, we had some technical difficulties. So we have this server over here, which is what you're going to be connecting with on those laptops. We cannot record that screen because it is not on the internet. So I was just going to go through these slides, kind of walk you through the general process for setting up the machine, and then I'll switch over to that like local area network, and we can get through some of the demo stuff. And then after I go through it, we can all take turns and build them ourselves on these laptops. And I have some helpers in the back from the PS team, so if you have any questions, just raise your hand, and one of us can come and help you out. So let's get started. Oh my. Okay, so here's the agenda for this talk. We're going over the whole installation process. It's very quick, thankfully. And yeah, this is very beginner friendly, so I will go through all the commands eventually. And yeah, we're also going to be going through two of the main KVM building machine mechanisms. So there's a GUI program called Virt Manager, Virtual Machine Manager for full legal name. And there's a command line interface too. So that is using the Virt utility and the Virt install command. And then after that, we'll be going over some of the storage concepts for KVM, some networking. We have some common problems during configuration that you may run into. So I have a few machines that are broken, and we can try to diagnose them together. And yeah, after that, we're going to have our little VM building session. And if you have any questions, I can try to answer them. So you just got your Linux machine. You want to get KVM on there. I don't know what's going on. And yeah, the first step you're going to want to do for installing KVM is updating your machine. At this point, I would show you, but we're going to have to do that after. For installing the KVM packages, you're going to want to install this KVM or QEMU KVM package. That is the underlying hardware emulator. The libvirt package, that handles all of the interface for KVM and all the KVM management. Virt install, I mentioned earlier, that is the actual command that builds the machine. Virt viewer, that handles all the graphics. And Virt manager is that Virt manager that I was talking about with the GUI. So once you have all those done with the install command, you are going to want to confirm the compatibility by running this command here, virt host validate. So this is a very helpful command. It runs through all of your hardware configuration, and it will determine if your computer can run KVM virtual machines. So as you can see, there are a few warnings. Most of them are deprecated. So C groups, that's one of them. That's, yeah, C group device control support. So that is a problem because there is, note of this. No, I don't. There's a new version of C group 2, I believe, and it is not recognized in this virt host validate, so it will just give a warning. One of the other warnings is IOMMU. If you were at Paul Jacoby's talk on the Fiber channel, that is the hardware. Yeah, it's a hardware interconnect with KVM. So right now I don't have it set up just because we have a bare bone machine, but you would want to enable that in the BIOS of your system if you were to use fiber channel pass-through. And the last one is secure guest support. This one is fully hardware dependent, so your system may have it, your system may not, but if it's a warning, it won't restrict your access from building machine, so we're all good in that sense. So the virtual machine manager. If you have used VMware or VirtualBox, this would probably be your first step into KVM. The graphic interface is very similar, as you can see. I have a few machines there. We like to go by princesses, our lab. And I'll show you the second bullet point in a second once we get to the demo part. But as you can see in the CPU usage, if your machine is running and it's on and doing stuff, it will show a little graph of how much CPU is being used. You can also enable it for memory and disk I/O and network I/O. So I'll show you how to enable those. One of the benefits of this virtual machine manager, it has a GUI, but if you are used to configuring using XML, they have an XML editor built in. So you have both options there. And yeah, as noted, most of these features will not be enabled by default. So if you wanted to have all the extra graphs, you'd have to enable that in your preferences, and XML editing is also not enabled by default. So if you have used the command line interface, this may be the route you want to take. Why? So there's a utility called Versh that is part of the KVM utility. And there's a lot of commands that you can use for managing your virtual machine. I put about a dozen useful ones. So Versh list, that will list all of your KVM machines that you built. Versh edit allows you to edit the XML configuration file for that given VM. Versh start and shut down, kind of explanatory, start and shut down your machines. Versh console, that will allow you to get into your console. Versh destroy, if your VM is just acting up and it won't shut down gracefully, that's how you would force off. Dump XML, that will be used to get the XML file for the machine. So you can kind of see how the machine is built, all the configurations. And if you wanted to build a machine from the XML, you could do Versh create. I also added a few commands on the side there. They're QEMU. Can never say that right, but that is the KVM emulator, and it will allow you to create virtual disks. So the first one there, that's assuming you have a QEMU disk, QCOW2, and it will print all of the information for that disk. And the QEMU image create command will actually create the QCOW2 file. So this is the other half of this command line. It is a command called virt install. So you can see there's a lot going on here. The man pages are very helpful for this if you are just getting started, but this command will just build a machine that is VMS ready. As you can see, there's a lot of options that are -- name, -- description. In red, I put the ones that you would generally want to change, and everything else you kind of want to keep it the same. So the name, obviously, you'd want to name the VM something that your system administrators would be able to quickly identify. Description, you can add a full string of whatever you need to describe with the machine. RAM is measured in megabytes, so keep that in mind. The VMS official recommendation is at least 8 gigabytes, so we'll be following that. vCPUs, at least 2 is the recommendation. And CPU hosts, that just made a note. Yeah, so that exposes the CPU's configuration to the guest. So you'll get the full pass-through privilege. These next 2 lines are the disks. So the first one there, you can see it's a device equals CD-ROM. So that is where you're going to load the ISO file for the VMS ISO. So it goes by path. So you need to specify the full path there. The bus, I tend to make them SATA just to differentiate from the SCSI disk I would make for the system disk. Boot order. This one doesn't matter too much for VMS as long as there is a boot order because it just boots into the boot manager. And we added a shareable tag at the end just so that other machines could also have access to this. The next one, disk path, very similar in design, except this one's going to be our system disk. So you're going to have to specify a size. This one is totally dependent on your configuration, but generally at least 20 gigabytes for the system disk. Bus, I put SATA, but you can also do SCSI. An important note, by default, KVM will not do cache write-through. This is the only supported cache for KVM virtualization. Because if you do write back, if you have like a power outage, surge, the information on the VMS will not be written to the machine the same way as a write through. So just be mindful of that when making your machine. And then sparse equals no. That will ensure that the disk is thick provisioned, which is another requirement for VMS. The next line, I think it's anytime I say next. Okay, no, it isn't. Next line is network. So that's where you'll be specifying all of your network cards, which are VNICs. So in this case, I'm building this NIC off of the verb bridge. You can specify a MAC if you want. If not, it will just create one for you. And for the model, VMS supports E1000, E1000E, and VirtIO. I think that's on the next slide. I put the requirements there. The next one down there is graphics. So if you're just going to run the VMS through the command line, we recommend just saying graphics none. It will help with the configuration. Won't take as long. If you are going to be using the GUI, you're going to want to enable graphics so you can obviously get your graphics. I have a machine with graphics enabled, so I can show that. OS type, that is where you would specify the operating system. In this case, VMS is not listed in the operating system list, so we just have to say none. I think they're hoping to get there eventually. We're around the list, so that's a hope. And then, yeah, OS variant is also very similar to OS type. This next one machine, do not change it. It is required for the Q35 chipset is required to enable the UEFI boot manager. And this bootloader will enable UEFI instead of BIOS. And we had to scrunch it a bit. So there's a few extras like VM port state, SMM, serial. That is to allow you to have a serial connection through the console. This PTY is just a terminal, so you can access it from the command line. And no reboot. That won't reboot the machine once you start it up. And auto start will auto start the machine once it's configured. So that is the virt install command. Do we have any questions right now, or get there when we get there? So you may be wondering, there's these two options. There's also a web interface version called the cockpit. I did not include that just because I wanted to keep it simple and accessible from this local server. So the pros of the virtual machine manager, it's a very simple GUI. Does not want to work. So yeah, it's a GUI. Everyone's familiar with these. If you've used virtual machines before with VMware and VirtualBox, it'll be very easy to translate that to KVM. Another thing that's good about Virtual Machine Manager, it will very clearly indicate if there's a configuration issue. So I have some practice machines I can show, but it will very clearly print out an error message saying, this is wrong, you need to do this. The cons being, you need to have a graphical console connection or an X11 forwarding, which is what we're using now, to access this interface. So the benefits of Virsh is very scriptable. So that virt install command right here, you can just run that in a bash script, and you can just keep building machines all you want. The other benefit is once you have this command all like set up, you just copy it and paste it in the command line, and you'll just have a machine ready. The drawbacks is there's a lot to it, and it's not as beginner friendly because you'll need to have at least like a baseline understanding of Linux to understand what all these things mean. So in this slide, we have the supported devices. So of course, the network devices, as mentioned earlier, the adapter types that are configured with VMS, you can have E1000, and starting with V923, E1000E and VirtIO. For networking, there's a recommendation if you have a lot of hosts on this or guests on the same host, building a network bridge may be beneficial because you can connect all the guests to that bridge, and if you have DHCP enabled, it'll just spit out an IP for you. There also is an option to pass through a NIC with Mac VTAP. So that will create a physical network on top of a virtual interface. So you can pass through that and have a direct line out to your VM guest. We don't have that set up here as we just have this simple server. So we'll be using, when you set up KVM, there's a virtual bridge that gets created called VR Bridge 0. So we'll be using that for our machine building. And on the right here, we have the supported storage devices. So for virtual disk types, QCOW2 and RAW are supported. And for disk buses, we have SCSI and SATA. And as pointed out here, with update 2, we now have fiber channel pass-through for data disks. If you haven't seen it, Paul Jacoby gave a talk yesterday, and he talks about all the configuration steps you need to enable that, mainly being the IOMMU that was pointed out in the virt host validate. So for managing storage, and the virtual machine manager, it is very simple. you just go to the VM you want. You can also go outside of the VM if you don't have the VM set up. Yeah, so you navigate to the VM you would like to edit, and there'll be a little light bulb. I think I have it in a screenshot here. Yeah, it's this one right here. That's to make a new machine. So yeah, you click on the light bulb and you would add hardware at the bottom left. I can show you that in a second. And then you would select or create custom storage using the manage button, and it will bring up the list of pools with all their volumes. The command line version is a little more complicated because you have to first build the pool and then add volumes to that pool using the KVM image create. And then to attach it to a disk or attach it to a VM that's already been configured, you would have to use a verse attach disk command. So for managing the network, again, Virtual Machine Manager is a good friend here. You would click Add Hardware once you have your machine set up, and then you would select Network on the sidebar, and it will give you a few options for network source. So by default, it will use that NAT verb bridge. You can also specify your own bridge if you built one, or you can pass through the VNIC with the Mac VTAP with a dedicated ENO device if you have those, ENS. And for the command line, it again gets a little more complicated, but if you're familiar with it, you can't beat it. So there's a verse attach interface VM, and you need to specify the type. So that will be, if it's a network, the NAT. Bridge would be the bridge device that you built. And then direct would be for Mac VTAP. Source, it's the name of the host device that you're using. So if you're using a bridge, it would look something like DR0. Ethernet for Mac VTAP would be ETHO. And then the model you'd have to specify would be the E1000, E1000E, or VirtIO. And I also added this slide just because we get this question quite a bit. In the version 923 installation guide, it will just say, oh, you might want to build a network bridge if you have a lot of VMs. But it doesn't really say how to do that. So I added a simple installation guide for building a network bridge. So as you can see, it uses a utility called NMCUI, which is Network Manager Command Line Interface. So you'd first build the bridge with connection add command. And then in step 2, we would configure the bridge to be associated with the physical network device. So as you can see, we have connection add type Ethernet, slave type. So it's not very nice, but the Ethernet becomes the slave of the bridge. And the connection name there, an interface, that would be the device that you're attaching. The next step, you would want to bring the bridge device up and take the interface down so that it can configure itself. And then once you have that step done, you just want to confirm that the bridge is operating functionally or configured properly. So you do sudo mcli connection show, and you would check if the bridge is listed with a bridge link show. And if you wanted any further instruction on how to configure this stuff, there are very helpful guides on the Oracle Linux and Red Hat Enterprise Linux documentation sites. So yes, if you need further help with that, those would be great resources. So I just added this last slide here as these are some common problems we run into when building machines. So you may run into a situation where your user just doesn't have the correct permissions for accessing virtual machines. This may be because the user you're using doesn't have the libvirt group. So I can actually show this one because I just did it for Kobe. You can see we added a user called Kobe. And then we added Kobe to the libvirt group here. And you can see he is now in this libvirt group. So if he were to log in on that user with his machine, once he's in this libvirt group, he can access Virt Manager, which is that GUI editor, and he will be able to configure the whole machine from there. So let's go back. You also may run into an issue where you have a storage error, like this one below, failed to start VM, cannot access a storage file. This may be because you did not build out your storage pool correctly, and libvirt can't access the file that is being stored there because it doesn't have permissions to view the file. So once you build the pool, libvirt will have access to that directory and all the files within it. So one thing you could do to check this is use the version pool list -- all. That will list all of them, even if they're down. And you could also check the XML file for the VM to make sure that everything's all set there. There's no like misdirected paths to the file. That was another issue we had. And yeah. There also could be an issue. The VM just doesn't boot at all. The first process you would want to do for this is check the chipset and firmware to make sure that they're Q35 and UEFI. It's actually funny if you don't set those. I can show you in a second. It gets a little crazy with all these graphics and everything. But it will try to boot into BIOS, and just not a good time. And if your device is not appearing in the boot manager, we would advise checking boot options in your GUI Virt Manager, because the device may be unchecked and won't appear present in the device list. So once you check that in the boot options, it will now present it there. So now that we have gone through the slides, I can switch over to the Wi-Fi and we can go through a little demo there. And then after that, we can all just take turns building machines and have some fun.